Do you ever wonder, what if the most powerful people in the world were all tied together by some dark, dark secret? Well, that's exactly the question at the very heart of the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. Today, we're going to unravel the story of the files that threatened to expose it all and the massive political firestorm in 2025 that brought this whole decades-long saga to a truly explosive climax.
All right, let's get right into it. The entire story really hangs on this one massive question. I mean, think about it. In an age where Washington can't seem to agree on anything, what on earth could possibly unite them in such a dramatic, almost unheard of way? The answer, it turns out, is a scandal that reached the absolute highest levels of global power, and a public that was just done waiting for answers.
I mean, just let that number sink in for a second. 427 to 1. We just don't see numbers like that in Washington, ever. It's like finding a unicorn. It tells you one thing, loud and clear. The pressure from the American people, from all sides, had become this unstoppable wave. And wow, once that dam of pressure broke, things moved fast. I'm talking lightning speed. In just a few dizzying weeks, a bill flies through the House, President Trump signs it into law, and boom, the Justice Department starts releasing the files. But, and this is a huge but, the story was so far from over. In fact, you could say the real fight, the one for actual honest-to-goodness transparency, was just getting started. And that's what kicked off this absolute political firestorm in 2025. It was a moment that created some of the absolute strangest bedfellows you can possibly imagine, and it turned people who were once allies into public enemies, all fighting over these secrets. And this is where things just get wild. I mean, the usual political playbook? Yeah, that got tossed right out the window. You had progressive Democrats teaming up with libertarian Republicans. I mean, when does that happen? But what was even crazier, you had some of President Trump's biggest, most loyal supporters calling out his own administration. They saw these so-called declassified binders and delayed votes as just smoke and mirrors. It was a total political earthquake. And you gotta understand, this wasn't just some inside-the-beltway squabble. No. This frustration was felt by millions of people. And Joe Rogan, with his massive platform, he really captured that feeling perfectly. His words just nailed it for a country that felt like it had been promised the truth for years, only to be told yet again, hey, nothing to see here, move along. So, to really get why people felt so betrayed, you have to understand just how long these secrets were kept and how deep they went. So, how did we even get to this point? Well, for that, we have to rewind the clock a bit. We got to go back and see how this one guy built a network of power so big, so influential, that it seemed like he could never be touched. Starting way back in the 80s, Jeffrey Epstein wasn't just some rich guy. He was a master networker. He was moving in these incredible circles of power. We're talking presidents, royalty, the biggest pop stars on the planet. He basically built this web of influence that acted as his ultimate shield. Now, it's really important to point out that the documents released so far do not implicate Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, or Michael Jackson in any illegal activity. But seeing these names, this is why the public demand for answers got so incredibly intense.
You know, back in 2002, a quote like this from Donald Trump probably would have been laughed off as, just guys being guys. But when you look at it now, through the lens of everything we know, it's just sinister. The phrase "on the younger side" takes on this horrifying new meaning. It is absolutely chilling to read today.
So their friendship reportedly blows up around 2004. But the story of why it ended, well, that's a perfect little snapshot of how murky everything in Epstein's world really is. You have two totally different stories. Was it a moral line in the sand, like the official version says? Or was it just a good old-fashioned business squabble over a mansion? The fact that we have these two conflicting narratives really shows you how truth itself just became another casualty in this whole mess. And that brings us to maybe the single most infuriating chapter of this whole story. This is the moment that really planted the seeds for all the public outrage that would come later. We're talking about the moment many people feel justice wasn't just slow, it was actively, deliberately sold out. The infamous 2008 plea deal. Okay, get ready, because this is the part of the story that still, to this day, makes people's blood boil. So you have federal prosecutors with what they think is a slam-dunk case, a 60-count indictment, ready to go. But then, behind closed doors, a secret deal gets made. Epstein ends up pleading to way lesser state charges, and he avoids the federal system entirely. And here's the kicker, the part that is just unbelievable. The deal had a secret clause that gave immunity not just to Epstein, but to any potential co-conspirators. And the victims, the people whose lives he destroyed, they weren't even told this was happening. It's just staggering. And the punishment for all of this, for ruining countless lives, it was basically a slap on the wrist. He was sentenced to 18 months in a county jail, but he got out in just 13. And get this, during that time, he was allowed to leave for work release 6 days a week. For so many people, this wasn't just a bad deal, it was a total and complete mockery of the justice system. So for about a decade, that ridiculous deal kind of let the whole story just simmer, right below the surface. But in 2018, it didn't just bubble up again. It absolutely exploded. It became this national obsession that would set the stage for the final massive showdown.
It all kicked off with one incredible year-long investigation by the Miami Herald. They basically blew the lid off that whole 2008 sweetheart deal, and that story, it lit a fire under the whole country, leading directly to Epstein's arrest about a year later. And for a moment, the world was just holding its breath, waiting for all these secrets to finally come out in court. And then, the absolute unthinkable happened.
So the official ruling on his death was suicide. But for a huge portion of the public, that explanation just didn't add up. It launched 1,000 conspiracy theories, the most prevalent being that he was silenced to protect all the powerful people he knew. Now, whether that's true or not, that belief is what really supercharged the demand for the files. People felt, if we can't get justice in a courtroom, we'll get it through the truth. And that brings us right back to where we started. Full circle. Back to 2025. Back to this massive fight that took years of frustration, anger, and suspicion and channeled it all into one single unified demand. Open the books. Show us everything. No more secret.
And this wasn't some polite request for a few documents. Oh no, this was a demand for the whole shebang. The public wanted every last scrap of information, flight logs from his jets, interview notes, every single name mentioned, details on that plea deal, everything. The Transparency Act was written specifically to make that happen. The intention was clear. Nothing was supposed to be off limit.
But what the public got felt like a total slap in the face. Sure, they released hundreds of thousands of pages, but so much of it was buried under these thick black lines. Those are called redactions. It's when they black out information. So the promise of total transparency was met with this giant wall of official secrecy. And hey, don't just take my word for it. Listen to the guy who literally co-wrote the law. Republican Congressman Thomas Massey, he came right out and called the release a gross failure to follow both the spirit and the letter of the law. I mean, that's a jaw-dropping statement from one of the bill's own authors. It was a clear sign that this fight was nowhere near over. And so we end up right back where we started, with a question. We saw this incredibly rare moment of unity that demanded sunlight. A whole nation was promised the truth. But with thousands upon thousands of pages still hidden behind black ink, the biggest question of all still hangs in the air. What secrets are the Epstein files still hiding?